You say you stayed for love because that's the easiest explanation to hold on to. It's the version that doesn't force you to face what was really happening inside you. Love sounds beautiful. Love justifies sacrifice. Love turns pain into something almost noble. But if you stop now, in silence, with no distractions at all, you'll realize it wasn't love that kept you there. It was fear. Fear of being alone with your own thoughts. Fear of the silence that would come after the end. Silence has always scared you more than pain. Pain, no matter how bad it is, takes up space. It creates movement, it creates urgency, it creates something to fix. Silence doesn't. Silence puts you face to face with yourself, without filters, without excuses, without distractions. In silence, there's no message to wait for, no behavior to analyze, no hope to project. In silence, there's only you, and you learned, very early on, to run from that encounter. You stayed because leaving would mean sitting with yourself and listening to questions you pushed away for far too long. Questions like, why did I accept so little? Why did I need to make myself smaller? Why did I confuse presence with value? Those questions hurt more than any absence from the other person, so you stayed. You stayed because the relationship, even while hurting, worked like constant noise that drowned those questions out. You kept yourself busy trying to read signs, interpreting short replies, justifying absences, waiting for crumbs of attention as if they were proof of something greater. That kept you moving. That kept you occupied. That stopped you from pausing. And pausing was dangerous because pausing meant listening to yourself. You started to normalize discomfort. You told yourself every relationship is hard, that no one gives everything, that loving requires patience. But deep down, you knew the effort was always coming from the same side. It was you who gave in, you who understood, you who waited, you who adjusted yourself to fit into a space that was never truly yours. Your body warned you the entire time. Constant anxiety, a tightness in your chest that appeared for no clear reason, a permanent state of alert, as if something was always about to go wrong. This is not love. Love does not put your body into survival mode. Love does not require constant vigilance. Love does not make you feel like you could lose everything at any moment. And still, you stayed. You stayed because the pain was familiar. You stayed because silence felt like unknown and threatening territory. The brain prefers predictable suffering over uncertain emptiness, and you held on to that. Pain became routine. Discomfort became home, and silence became a threat. You adapted so much that you barely recognized yourself anymore. The person you once were started to fade away. Your tastes, your spontaneity, your sense of security, everything was pushed into the background to sustain something that was already costing you more than it gave back. And even then, you said it was love. Because admitting it was fear would require a courage you didn't yet have. There comes a moment when running away becomes exhausting. It doesn't happen with a big explosion. It isn't a memorable fight or a cinematic abandonment. It's a silent, deep exhaustion that slowly builds up inside. An exhaustion from explaining yourself too much, justifying yourself too much, waiting too much. An exhaustion from feeling like you're always trying to hold on to something that seems to slip away all the time. You start to realize that something no longer fits. If it were love, it wouldn't require you to stay on constant alert. It wouldn't make you feel like you have to prove your worth all the time. It wouldn't leave you insecure about your place. You begin to notice that you don't feel peace, you feel tension, you don't feel safety, you feel anxiety, you don't feel presence, you feel waiting. Little by little, it becomes impossible to ignore an uncomfortable truth. You weren't there to love, you were there to avoid feeling the emptiness. The relationship turned into an emotional escape, an anesthetic against silence. As long as someone existed, even distant, even absent, you didn't have to face your own loneliness. You kept yourself busy trying to understand the other person, when in reality, you were avoiding understanding yourself. You clung to small crumbs of attention because they gave you the feeling that something was still happening. Not because they nourished you, but because they prevented silence from fully settling in. When the other person pulled away a little more, when the relationship grew colder, when absence became more obvious, you felt panic. It wasn't fear of losing that person. It was fear of losing the noise they created inside you, the noise that hid your dissatisfaction, your neediness, your need to choose yourself. This realization hurts. It hurts because it dismantles the story you told yourself to survive. It hurts because it reveals that you stayed where you weren't seen, that you accepted less than you deserved, that you negotiated your dignity to avoid being alone. And no one likes to face that. But this pain also carries something powerful. It shows that there is a part of you that has awakened, a part that no longer accepts living in service of fear, a part that begins to question the price you are paying to avoid silence. And that questioning is not weakness, it is awareness. Awareness hurts because it removes the comfort of excuses. It exposes the emotional cost of running away. It shows that every day you stayed was also a day of self-abandonment. And there comes a point when continuing costs more than leaving. Even if leaving is frightening, even if silence feels enormous, now you know. And once you know, you can no longer pretend you don't see it. There comes a moment when silence can no longer be avoided. The relationship ends, or you pull away, or you simply realize that staying there means losing yourself completely. And then silence arrives. At first it feels brutal. It is loud on the inside. Emotions come all at once. Guilt, longing, emptiness, fear. Not fear of the other person, but of yourself. But something unexpected happens when you stop running. Silence begins to organize what was once chaotic. It doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. For the first time in a long while, you begin to hear your own voice without interference, a voice that had been muffled by distractions, expectations, and fears. You start to remember who you were before you made yourself so small, before you confused suffering with love, before you believed that staying was always more honorable than leaving. You realize that silence was never the enemy. It was the portal back to yourself. Little by little, being alone stops feeling like punishment. It becomes space, space to rebuild boundaries, space to feel without anesthesia, space to choose yourself without guilt. You understand that you don't need someone else to feel whole. You need to stop abandoning yourself. And then comes the most important turning point of all. You realize that being alone was never the problem. The problem was being with someone and still losing yourself. The problem was living in service of fear. The problem was confusing attachment with love. When that realization lands, something changes permanently. You no longer accept relationships that require you to erase yourself. You no longer accept emotional scarcity, disguised as intensity. You no longer accept living in a constant state of alert. You choose yourself. And that changes everything, because leaving, many times, is the greatest act of self-love that exists. Silence no longer frightens you, it supports you. It clears your mind, it gives you back to yourself. If you made it this far, it's because this truth was already ready to be heard. Even if it hurts, even if it scares you. Staying with silence is the beginning of freedom.